The morning sun of 3 different stars cast rainbow shadows through the massive windows of Lecture Hall 7. Jake Thompson sat in the back row, trying not to feel out of place among the most brilliant minds in the galaxy. His human eyes scanned a room filled with beings that looked like they stepped out of science fiction movies. There were the Zentari with their crystal-like skin that changed colors with their emotions, the Vorthak whose tentacles moved like liquid mercury, and the insect-like Clixon whose compound eyes seemed to see everything at once. Professor Vex entered the room with his usual dramatic flair. The tall, gray-skinned alien moved with the confidence of someone who had spent centuries studying the most dangerous creatures in known space. His 4 purple eyes swept across the classroom as students quickly settled into their seats. Jake noticed how even the most confident alien students seemed to shrink a little when those ancient eyes looked their way. "Today marks your final examination," Professor Vex announced, his voice carrying easily through the hall without any need for amplification. "For the past 2 years, you have studied theoretical xenobiology. You have memorized the behavioral patterns of 1,000 species. You have learned to identify threat levels and biological markers. But theory means nothing without practice." Jake felt his stomach tighten. He had worked twice as hard as everyone else just to keep up. While his classmates could process information at superhuman speeds or see in spectrums he couldn't even imagine, he had only his human brain and determination. The other students had been polite but distant, treating him like a curious pet rather than an equal. Professor Vex activated the holographic display in the center of the room. A 3-dimensional image appeared, showing a creature that made Jake's blood run cold. The shadow beast looked like a cross between a panther and smoke itself. Its body seemed to shift and flow, never quite solid, never quite gas. Its eyes glowed with an intelligence that felt almost human, which somehow made it more terrifying rather than less. "The shadow beast of Kepler 9. Professor Vex continued, clearly enjoying the fear rippling through his students. "For over 3,000 years, xenobiologists from across the galaxy have attempted to study these creatures. They are perhaps the most intelligent predators we have ever encountered. Their telepathic abilities allow them to read the minds of any creature within a mile radius. They know your thoughts before you do." A Zentari student named Christok raised one of her many arms. Her skin had turned a deep blue, which Jake had learned meant she was worried. "Professor, if they can read minds, how are we supposed to capture one? Surely they would see any trap coming." Professor Vex's mouth curved into what might have been a smile on a human face, but looked slightly menacing on his alien features. "That is exactly the challenge. Every previous attempt has failed. The hegemony empire sent their best military tacticians. The creatures escaped their quantum nets before they were even deployed. The collective tried using their hive mind coordination to confuse the beasts. The shadow beast simply read all their minds simultaneously and vanished into the void." Jake's classmate Thorjen, a massive rock-like being from the asteroid belts, spoke up. "What makes you think we can succeed where entire civilizations have failed?" "Perhaps you cannot," Professor Vex replied casually. "Perhaps this assignment will humble you all. Perhaps you will learn that intelligence and technology are not always enough. The shadow beasts have killed 47 researchers in the last century alone. Not from malice, you understand, but from pure predatory instinct." The room fell silent, except for the nervous clicking of claws and the soft hum of translator devices. Jake looked around at his classmates and saw the same expression on every face, regardless of species. Pure terror mixed with determination. These were the best students from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they were all afraid. "You will work alone," Professor Vex added, clearly enjoying the mounting tension. "No assistance from your homeworlds. No advanced technology beyond what the Academy provides. You have 1 week to capture a shadow beast alive and unharmed. Anyone who fails automatically fails the course and will be expelled from the program." Jake felt sweat beading on his forehead. 2 years of work, of struggling to prove that humans belonged among the galactic elite, could end in 7 days. He watched his classmates' various appendages twitch with nervousness. The assignment seemed impossible, designed to break their confidence and show them their limitations. But as he stared at the holographic shadow beast, something stirred in Jake's mind. While his classmates saw a monster to be conquered, he found himself wondering what the creature was thinking. What did it feel like to be hunted constantly? What did it want beyond survival? The thought felt dangerously naive, but somehow, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was approaching this challenge completely wrong. The first attempt came from the Christek delegation. These beings looked like living diamonds, their bodies reflecting light in ways that hurt to look at directly. They were known throughout the galaxy for their mathematical precision and their ability to bend energy like clay. Jake watched from the observation deck as 3 Christek students worked together, their crystalline hands weaving patterns in the air that made reality itself seem to bend. Their energy cage was a thing of beauty. It shimmered and twisted through dimensions that human eyes couldn't even perceive properly. The structure existed in 17 different realities at once, creating what should have been an inescapable prison. The mathematics were perfect, the energy calculations flawless. Even Professor Vex nodded approvingly at their technical skill. The shadow beast materialized in the center of their testing chamber like smoke given form. For a moment, it seemed curious about the strange energy pattern surrounding it. Then its glowing eyes focused on the Christek students behind the protective barrier. Jake saw something shift in those alien eyes, a flash of what almost looked like amusement. The creature simply walked through the cage as if it wasn't there. Not around it, not over it, but straight through walls of energy that should have been stronger than diamond. The Christek students stood frozen in shock, their perfect trap useless. The shadow beast paused at the barrier separating it from the students, tilted its head like a curious cat, then vanished back into the void realm it came from. "How?" whispered Zephin, the lead Christek student. His crystalline skin had lost all its color. The energy matrix was perfect. The dimensional locks were secure. Professor Vex's 4 eyes showed no emotion. The creature read your minds before you even began building. It knew every dimension your cage would occupy and simply avoided those spaces. The second attempt came from the swarm students, and Jake found their approach even more impressive. The swarm were a hive-minded species who could coordinate their actions with the precision of a computer program. They thought as one mind across multiple bodies, which should have made them unpredictable to a mind-reading predator. 20 swarm students surrounded the testing chamber, their insect-like bodies moving in perfect synchronization. They had planned the most elaborate ambush Jake had ever seen. Some would attack from above, others from below, while a third group would drive the shadow beast toward capture nets from behind. Their timing was flawless, their coordination inhuman. The shadow beast appeared in the chamber and immediately began moving. But instead of trying to escape, it seemed to be dancing. Jake realized with growing horror that the creature was moving in exactly the same patterns as the swarm students. Somehow, it had tapped into their hive mind and was reading all 20 minds simultaneously. Every move the swarm made, the shadow beast countered perfectly. When they dove from above, it was already rolling to the side. When they tried to herd it toward the nets, it was already moving in the opposite direction. The coordinated attack became a coordinated disaster as swarm students collided with each other. Their perfect timing turned against them. The shadow beast sat in the center of the chaos and made a sound that Jake swore sounded like laughter. The third attempt nearly ended in tragedy. The hegemon students were artificial beings, their mechanical minds supposedly immune to telepathic interference. They deployed quantum nets that existed in a state of probability rather than fixed reality. These nets could theoretically capture anything that existed in normal space. The shadow beast's response was violent. The moment the quantum nets activated, the creature let out a psychic scream that shattered every piece of glass in the observation deck. Jake felt like someone had driven a spike through his skull. Around him, students from a dozen different species collapsed, clutching their heads in agony. 3 students ended up in the medical bay with what the doctors called psychic burns. Their minds had been seared by the creature's rage. Jake visited them later and found them staring at the ceiling with empty eyes, mumbling about shadows that wouldn't stop moving. "It felt betrayed," whispered Kent, a normally tough Vortex student whose tentacles now trembled constantly, like we had broken some kind of trust. With each failed attempt, the shadow beast became more aggressive. It would appear in the chamber already angry, its form crackling with dark energy. Jake noticed that it was spending less time in each test, as if growing impatient with the constant attacks on its freedom. Professor Vex began pacing during the lessons, his usual confidence shaken. Jake overheard him talking to another faculty member about whether the assignment was even possible. "Perhaps I underestimated these creatures," he admitted. "Their intelligence may be far beyond what we assumed." Jake sat in his dorm room that night, thinking about what he had witnessed. Every attempt had treated the Shadow Beast like a problem to be solved, a puzzle to be cracked through superior technology or coordination. But what if that was exactly the wrong approach? What if the creature wasn't just reading their minds for tactical advantage, but actually understanding their intentions? The thought made him uncomfortable because it suggested something his classmates seemed unwilling to consider. Maybe the Shadow Beast didn't want to be captured because it knew exactly what that meant. Maybe it wasn't just an animal acting on instinct, but a thinking being defending its freedom. And maybe that changed everything. While his classmates spent their time in the medical bay or designing new capture methods, Jake found himself drawn to the observation deck. The Shadow Beast had taken up residence in the testing chamber, refusing to return to whatever void dimension it normally inhabited. At first, Jake thought this was strange behavior for a creature that valued its freedom so highly. But as he watched day after day, he began to understand. The creature was lonely. Jake spent hours studying its movements through the reinforced glass. The Shadow Beast would pace the perimeter of the chamber in the same pattern every time, its smoky form rippling with what Jake was starting to recognize as emotions. Sometimes it would stop in the center of the room and make low, haunting calls that echoed off the walls. The sound reminded Jake of whales singing in Earth's oceans, beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. His alien classmates saw something completely different. When Thorjen visited the observation deck, his rocky features showed only calculation. "Look how it tests the walls," he rumbled. "It's searching for weaknesses, planning another escape." When Zephin came by, his crystalline skin flickered with analytical patterns. "Notice the energy fluctuations when it moves. It's building power for another psychic attack." But Jake saw something else entirely. The way the creature's head tilted when footsteps echoed in the hallway suggested it was hoping for company. The gentle way it touched the walls seemed more like curiosity than aggression. Most telling of all, it had stopped vanishing back to its home dimension, choosing instead to remain in the sterile chamber where it might encounter other intelligent beings. On the fourth day, Jake made a decision that would have horrified the professors. He requested permission to enter the testing chamber alone. The request was denied immediately. Of course, the Shadow Beast was classified as extremely dangerous, and no student was allowed direct contact. But Jake had grown up on Earth, where rules were more like guidelines when it came to animal behavior. He waited until the night shift, when only automated systems monitored the chamber. Using his student access card, he slipped into the testing area. His heart pounded as he approached the barrier controls. If the creature attacked him, there would be no one to help. But something deep in his gut told him that wasn't going to happen. The Shadow Beast noticed him immediately, its glowing eyes fixed on Jake through the barrier, and for a moment, both human and creature studied each other in silence. Jake felt a gentle pressure in his mind, not the violent intrusion his classmates had described, but something more like a cautious greeting. He tried to project calmness and curiosity rather than fear or aggression. To his amazement, the creature moved closer to the barrier. Its smoky form solidified slightly, and Jake could see details that weren't visible in the security footage. The Shadow Beast was beautiful in an alien way. Its dark form shot through veins of silver light. Its eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human in its depth. Jake started visiting every night. He couldn't enter the chamber itself without triggering security alerts, but he could sit by the barrier and simply be present. He brought things from his dorm room, small tokens that reminded him of Earth. A bag of chocolate chip cookies that his mother had sent in his last care package. A portable speaker that played quiet classical music. A worn paperback book that he would read aloud, even though he doubted the creature understood English. The other students noticed his nightly disappearances and started asking questions. When Jake finally admitted what he was doing, the reaction was swift and harsh. "You're wasting your time," Kristoff told him, her skin shifting to the red patterns that indicated frustration. That creature is a predator. It's probably just studying you to find better ways to attack. Vex 9, one of the hegemon students, was even more direct. Human emotional responses are well documented as inefficient. You're applying primitive pack bonding behaviors to an alien intelligence that cannot reciprocate such connections. But Jake ignored their criticism. He had grown up with dogs, cats, horses, and dozens of other Earth species. He knew the difference between an animal that was planning to attack and one that was simply curious. Every night, the shadow beast would move closer to the barrier when its senses approach. It would settle down in a relaxed posture and seem to listen when he read or played music. Most remarkably, its behavior during the day began to change. The restless pacing decreased. The lonely calls became less frequent. When other students came to observe, the creature would look toward the spot where Jake usually sat, as if expecting to see him there. Professor Vex noticed a change too. Interesting, he murmured during one of their observation sessions. The specimen seems to be adapting to captivity more successfully than predicted. Jake bit his tongue to keep from correcting him. The shadow beast wasn't adapting to captivity. It was responding to friendship. On the 7th night, Jake brought something different, a small potted plant from the Academy's botanical garden. Earth plants were rare and precious in space, but he thought the creature might enjoy seeing something alive and growing. As he settled into his usual spot by the barrier, the shadow beast approached as always. But this time, something was different. The creature extended one smoky tendril toward the barrier, not aggressively, but gently. Jake found himself reaching out as well, pressing his palm against the energy field that separated them. For just a moment, their minds touched, not the violent intrusion his classmates had experienced, but a gentle sharing of thoughts and emotions. Jake felt the creature's curiosity about Earth, its loneliness in a strange place, and underneath it all, a growing trust in the small human who visited every night. When Jake finally returned to his dorm, he realized that everything had changed. Tomorrow would be their last day to complete the assignment, and while his classmates prepared for one final attempt at capture, Jake was beginning to suspect that force had never been the answer. Maybe the shadow beast didn't need to be captured at all. Maybe it just needed to choose to stay. The morning of the final day arrived with the weight of failure hanging over the entire class. Jake's alien classmates had spent the night preparing one last desperate attempt. The Christex students were building an even more complex energy prison. The swarm had recruited additional hive members from their home colony. The hegemon were upgrading their quantum technology with experimental modifications that hadn't been tested. Jake sat in his dorm room, staring at a photo his sister had sent from Earth. It showed their old dog, Rex, sleeping peacefully next to their cat, Whiskers, two species that should have been natural enemies, living together as family. The image reminded him of something his grandfather used to say, "You catch more flies with honey than vinegar." While his classmates prepared for war, Jake prepared for friendship. He made his way to the testing chamber during the breakfast hour, when most students were eating. The hallways were quiet except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Jake carried a small bag containing the last of his Earth snacks and his portable music player. His hands were steady, but his heart raced with nervous energy. Professor Vex was already in the observation deck, reviewing data from the previous failed attempts. His four purple eyes looked tired, and Jake noticed the professor's usual confidence had been replaced by something that looked almost like defeat. "Mr. Thompson," Professor Vex said, without looking up, "You're early. Are you prepared for your attempt?" "Yes, sir," Jake replied, though his definition of preparation was probably very different from what the professor expected. The shadow beast was waiting in the chamber, as it had been for the past week. But something was different about its posture. Instead of the aggressive stance it had taken during the other students' attempts, it seemed almost relaxed. Its smoky form drifted peacefully around the chamber, occasionally pausing to look toward the observation deck, where Jake usually sat at night. Other students began filing into the observation area as word spread that the human was finally making his attempt. Jake could hear their whispered conversations, most of them predicting his failure within minutes. After all, if their advanced technology couldn't contain the creature, what could a primitive human possibly do? Jake requested access to the chamber itself, not just the outer containment area. Professor Vex hesitated, clearly remembering the injuries from previous attempts. But academic protocol demanded that each student be given the same opportunity, regardless of their species' perceived limitations. The energy barrier deactivated with soft hum, and Jake stepped into the chamber. The shadow beast immediately noticed the change, its glowing eyes focusing on the small human who had entered its space. For a moment, neither moved. Jake could feel the weight of dozens of alien eyes watching from behind the safety of reinforced glass. Jake knelt down slowly, making himself smaller and less threatening. He pulled out one of his grandmother's homemade cookies and placed it on the floor between himself and the creature. Then he simply sat back and waited, his mind as calm and open as he could make it. The shadow beast approached cautiously. Jake felt a familiar, gentle pressure in his mind, but this time he didn't resist. He let the creature see his memories of Earth, his feelings of homesickness, his genuine fascination with meeting an alien intelligence. Most importantly, he let it sense his complete lack of desire to trap or harm it. The creature's telepathic probe grew stronger, but not invasive. It was like having a conversation without words, sharing emotions and intentions directly. Jake felt the shadow be surprised at finding a mind that held no aggression, no plans for capture, no hidden agenda. For centuries, every intelligent being this creature had encountered had seen it as something to be conquered or studied. Jake was the first to simply want to understand. The shadow beast moved closer, its form becoming more solid as it approached. Jake slowly extended his hand, palm open and relaxed. The creature stretched out one tendril shadow and gently touched Jake's fingers. The contact sent a wave of emotion through both beings. The shadow beast's loneliness, its intelligence, its desperate desire for connection with other thinking creatures, flooded Jake's mind. In return, Jake shared his own feelings of being an outsider, of struggling to find his place among beings so different from himself. Behind the safety barrier, Professor Vex dropped his datapad. The other students pressed against the glass, their various appendages twitching with disbelief. The creature that had resisted every advanced technology, every military strategy, every brilliant scientific approach, was nuzzling Jake's hand like an earth cat seeking affection. Jake stood slowly, and the shadow beast rose with him. When he took a step toward the exit, the creature followed without hesitation. There were no chains, no energy fields, no restraining devices of any kind. The most dangerous and uncontainable being in known space was simply walking alongside a human college student because it chose to. The observation deck erupted in chaos. Students from a dozen species chattered in their native languages, trying to process what they had witnessed. Some demanded that Jake explain his technique. Others insisted it had to be some kind of trick. Professor Vex stood in stunned silence, his four eyes wide with amazement. In over 300 years of teaching, he had never seen anything like this. The human had accomplished in minutes what entire civilizations had failed to do in centuries. But Jake wasn't thinking about victory or proving his species' worth. He was thinking about the loneliness he had felt in the creature's mind, and how it perfectly matched his own feelings of being different and misunderstood. Sometimes he realized the most advanced solution was also the most simple. Just be a friend. The silence in the observation deck stretched on for what felt like forever. Professor Vex stood frozen, his four eyes locked on the impossible scene before him. Jake Thompson, a human student who had barely passed most of his theoretical exams, was casually walking around the testing chamber with Shadow Beast following him like a devoted pet. The creature that had terrorized xenobiologists across the galaxy was now gently bumping against Jake's shoulder, making soft purring sounds that no one had ever heard before. Its smoky form had solidified into something almost cat-like, though still twice the size of any Earth feline. The silver veins running through its dark body pulsed with what could only be described as contentment. "This is impossible," whispered Thorjen, his rocky features cracked with disbelief. The creature should have read his mind and sensed the trap. "What trap?" Jake called out from inside the chamber, his voice carrying easily through the intercom system. "I'm not trying to trap anyone." Kristock's crystalline skin flickered through rapid color changes as she tried to process what she was witnessing. But the assignment was to capture the shadow beast. How can you complete the test without containing it? Jake looked down at the creature beside him, which had now settled into a comfortable sitting position at his feet. One of its tendrils was wrapped loosely around Jake's ankle, not restraining him but simply maintaining contact. Who says I haven't captured it? It's right here with me. It's just not in a cage. Professor Vex finally found his voice. Mr. Thompson, please explain your methodology. The galactic scientific community needs to understand how you accomplished what our greatest minds could not. Jake sat down cross-legged on the chamber floor, and the shadow beast immediately curled up next to him like an enormous, otherworldly house cat. It's not really that complicated. Jake began, scratching behind what might have been the creature's ears. On Earth, humans live alongside thousands of different species. We domesticated wolves, cats, horses, cows, chickens, and hundreds of others. We learned to work with dolphins, elephants, and even bees. The shadow beast made a sound that was almost like a purr, clearly enjoying the attention. The thing is, Jake continued, we didn't domesticate these animals through force or superior technology. We did it through partnership. We offered them something they wanted: food, protection, companionship. And in return, they helped us survive. It was always about mutual benefit, never domination. Vex 9, the hegemon student, processed this information through his mechanical mind. But humans are technologically primitive compared to galactic standards. How does this partnership ability translate to advanced species interactions? Jake smiled, remembering all the nights he had spent reading to his lonely alien friend. Because intelligence doesn't eliminate the need for emotional connection. If anything, it makes that need stronger. The more aware you are of your own existence, the more you crave understanding from others who share that awareness. The shadow beast lifted its head and looked directly at Professor Vex. For the first time since the experiments began, its telepathic contact was gentle rather than aggressive. The professor's eyes widened as he felt the creature's thoughts. Not the violent intrusion he had expected, but something more like a polite introduction. It's trying to communicate. Professor Vex breathed, not to attack or defend, but simply to make contact. Over the following days, word of Jake's success spread throughout the Galactic Academy and beyond. Representatives from major civilizations arrived to witness the impossible partnership between human and shadow beast. Jake found himself giving demonstrations, explaining over and over how empathy could succeed where technology had failed. The shadow beast, which Jake had begun calling Buddy, seemed to enjoy the attention. It would perform simple tasks not because it was commanded to, but because it wanted to help its human friend succeed. The creature's intelligence became more apparent daily, as it learned to recognize different alien species and adjust its behavior accordingly. The Academy's administration was forced to completely reconsider their approach to xenobiology. For centuries, they had focused on studying alien life forms as subjects to be analyzed and categorized. Jake's success suggested an entirely different approach, one based on communication and mutual respect rather than scientific detachment. Within months, Jake found himself in an unprecedented position. Despite being just a student, he was asked to design a new curriculum focused on what the Academy termed interspecies emotional intelligence. The courses would teach future xenobiologists to approach alien life forms as potential partners rather than specimens. The irony wasn't lost on Jake. For his entire time at the Academy, he had been seen as a primitive human, the one whose emotional responses were considered weaknesses in a galaxy dominated by logic and technology. Now those same emotions were being recognized as humanity's greatest strength. Buddy became the Academy's first voluntary research partner. Instead of being studied as a captive specimen, the shadow beast chose to share information about its species, its home dimension, and its unique abilities. The scientific discoveries that emerged from this willing partnership advanced xenobiology more in 6 months than the previous century of forced studies had accomplished. Other shadow beasts began appearing at the Academy, drawn by their companions' obvious contentment. Soon, Jake was teaching not just alien students but shadow beasts themselves, creating the galaxy's first truly integrated classroom where multiple species learn from each other as equals. Professor Vex often stood in the back of these classes, watching his former student teach beings that had once terrified the greatest minds in the galaxy. Remarkable, he would whisper to himself, finally understanding that intelligence came in many forms, and sometimes the most advanced solution was also the most simple. In a universe full of advanced technology and superior minds, humanity's gift for friendship had proven to be the most valuable tool of all.